What is going on there, YouTube, and welcome back to another comic book video. This is the channel where we sit down and cover different comic book stories from Marvel, DC, and even IDW as well. This time we are going to continue our coverage over the Ultimate Marvel Universe, and we have been covering this universe for some time now, but we are going to continue covering more Ultimate Spider-Man, where we pick up with Volume 3 of this current run, where we get our first appearance of Ultimate Chameleon in this universe. But there are some differences with this character from the main Marvel Universe version, and you will see once we go through this story. But if you like today's video, please leave me a like down below and also subscribe to my channel for more content to come in the near future. Also, any suggestions on books I should read, well, please let me know in the comments below, because you never know, your suggestion could be a future video down the road. But guys, I do hope you enjoy today's video. Alright, so this is the book where Brian Michael Bendis put a lot of stuff in here for just a 6-part storyline. To me, honestly, he should have cut out some things. For example, we get the return of Spider-Woman, Jessica Drew. In this universe, she is the clone of Peter Parker, and the reason why we pick up with her is because she is going after the Bombshells, this villain mother and daughter duo we met in Volume 1 of this current Ultimate Spider-Man run. Except in the middle of the fight, you have the Human Torch appear, and this is Brian Michael Bendis building off of Ultimate Spider-Man number 129, which was the first time these two heroes met each other and the Human Torch started to crush on Jessica Drew. Now, after they beat the Bombshells, you have Spider-Woman leave because she does not want anything to do with the Human Torch, except the Human Torch follows her and asks why she is giving him the cold shoulder. And we know because to her, it is weird to be with him because he's best friends with Peter Parker, but also the fact that she is the clone of Peter Parker. Now, she does not tell him that, but we see after a while, the Human Torch is able to get her to start liking him, and we can tell that maybe a kiss happened. We don't see a kiss, but we can only imagine that Human Torch and Spider-Woman did kiss. Then Brian Michael Bendis continues to give us some more random stuff in this first chapter, where we see Peter Parker arriving at school where he is confronted by Gwen Stacy. And for you guys who may have forgotten, Gwen Stacy and Peter are now dating, but we see her take Peter into the bathroom, where we see Mary Jane, Kitty Pryde, and Gwen Stacy about to give Peter a haircut, which they do, and of course his hair is no longer the long hairstyle we have been seeing for a while. Again, it is another random thing in this book. We then jump over to the home of the Parkers, where Johnny Storm is telling everyone about how he is in love and thanks to someone from Spider-Man's life. And this is a little bit funny because Peter starts naming all of the women he has met as Spider-Woman, and it makes Gwen Stacy mad. Except then, Johnny tells Peter it is Spider-Woman, and Peter begins to freak out because Spider-Woman is from that horrible night with all of the clones of him, plus there was a clone of his father that night too. And so I'm guessing the thought of Johnny Storm kissing his clone really does bothers him. But to close on chapter 1 of this book, we jump forward a day and we pick up with all of the teen characters in school, where it does seem like this is going to be a normal day for everyone, except that is when the FBI walks in to arrest Kitty Pryde, because remember, at this point in Ultimate Marvel, being a mutant is illegal. Now, at the beginning of this run, we learn that she has some kind of deal made where she gets a pass unlike the other mutants. But for some reason, that pass is now gone and she is being arrested. Now, of course, this starts a whole commotion in the classroom. Everyone is wondering what is going to happen. But then you have Kong punch one of the agents. Remember, before Ultimatum, Kong and Kitty began to date, but that stopped right after Ultimatum. Now, with that happening, the other agents do grab Kong, but you have Kitty tell them to let him go so she can talk to him. Except we see her use her powers to escape with Kong instead. And so now Kitty Pryde and Kong are now outlaws. Now I'm going to skip over the school principal part because really It is him telling every parent at the school meeting that he quits. Also a rant on how he feels about all mutants being treated wrong because of one mutant's mistake. That is really it, but it was kind of a cool moment in the book. What is really important is that Spider-Man, Iceman, and the Human Torch put on their hero costumes and go to the home of Kitty Pryde to see if she is there, only to see that her house is surrounded by a bunch of different news channel crew. Except that is when the Shroud appears blowing up one of the vans there. Now we know the Shroud is Kitty Pryde, except Spider-Man and the others do not know that yet. But they figure it out very quickly when Spider-Man goes to attack the Shroud and he phases through her, letting them know that it is Kitty Pryde, that Kitty Pryde is the Shroud. This is where we see Spider-Man and the others try to stop Kitty Pryde, except she has been training to use her powers in different ways. She's able to make herself very durable to the point that when she hits one of the guys, she sends them flying. But she is upset because at the school, none of the guys helped her with the FBI agents. Now we know why they did not help her, because if the guys did, it would blow their cover on who they are. But she does not understand that, and she leaves again by using her powers to phase underground. But to close on chapter 2 of this book, we see Mary Jane at the school looking at the video that she recorded when Kitty Pryde was about to be arrested, and she is wondering what she should do with the tape. But then the next day, you have Aunt May call another family meeting where you have Aunt May say that it may be best for the boys to not be heroes for a short period of time, because right now there are too many eyes focusing on their school right now, thanks to Kitty Pryde. Now the boys at first tried their best to argue with Aunt May, but you have Peter agree with her on the fact that it's probably best for everyone for them not to be heroes at the moment. And this leads into Bobby Drake asking about getting a job, where it does transition us into seeing Peter and Bobby Drake both working at the fast food restaurant that Peter has been working at. But this is where we see Mary Jane appear, where she asks to talk to only Peter and Gwen Stacy privately. Now this is where Peter and Gwen find out that Mary Jane recorded Kitty Pryde when she almost got arrested back at the school, and she asked Peter and Gwen Stacy what should she do with this tape. Now Peter tells her that she should take this to the Daily Bugle as a way to help Kitty Pryde, but to show how the FBI are wrong on how they handle the situation. A bunch of men with guns rushed into a school full of children to arrest a mutant. Yeah, that does not look good for the FBI. And this is the first time we see the Daily Bugle post ultimatum, and we learn they have gone digital now. Remember, in the middle of ultimatum, we learned that the paper is going to close soon. They couldn't sell because by these times people get their news on the internet, and so they had to change their ways. But you have Mary Jane and Peter meet up with Ben Urich, who we know that Ben Urich has been kind of a mentor to Peter at the paper, and so they have a close bond with each other. And we do see Mary Jane and Peter tell Ben everything about Kitty Pryde and Mary Jane's tape. But you also have Ben Urich kind of test Mary Jane to see if she's an honest reporter, except while they were going through the test, Peter saw Jonah and waves hi at Jonah. But Jonah gives him a mug look, which makes Peter wonder what in the world is going on, and that is when Peter's spider sense goes off, telling him something is up, and so he goes after Jonah. And so he gets on the elevator and goes down to the lower level and runs into Jonah, where you have Jonah ask Peter, who in the world is he? Where Peter is confused because Jonah should know who he is. And that is when Jonah starts to attack him and tells us that this is not Jonah. And so you have Peter use his powers to try to fight back against this fake Jonah. Except that is when the fake Jonah uses a stun gun to knock out Peter. And this is where we learn that this is the first appearance of this universe Ultimate Chameleon, where we see him take the appearance of Peter Parker and locks our Peter Parker in the trunk of a car and plans to live as Peter Parker to learn more about Peter, because to the Chameleon, why did this random kid follow him and how was he that strong in their fight? And just like any story where the main character is replaced by a fake, the fake begins to mess up the original person's life. And so you have the Chameleon begin to do that while he's in a taxi car with Mary Jane. Where we know that Mary Jane and Peter Parker used to date, but Chameleon does not know that. And so you have the Chameleon basically make a move on Mary Jane, where she responds back to his move. And so we have a scene of them kissing, and to Mary Jane, this is Peter. Now when Mary Jane asks why he did that, the Chameleon says because he knew that she wanted to kiss, which makes Mary Jane mad and she gets out of the taxi car. This leads into the Chameleon going to the home of Peter Parker to learn more about who Peter is, where of course he runs into Bobby Drake, thinking that Bobby must be Peter's brother, and then Aunt May appears, which confuses Chameleon even more because how old she looks. Then you have Johnny Storm appear as well, and so to the Chameleon, he is really confused on what is going on in this household. But then he goes upstairs to Peter's room, which again is in the attic, to learn more about Peter, where of course he is trying to figure out Peter's computer password to see if Peter may have some kind of secrets on his computer. Now what really confuses the Chameleon was Gwen Stacy, because while he was on the phone explaining to his partner why he gave up on the Jonah mission to learn more about Peter Parker, that is when Gwen Stacy walks in and of course leads into them making out. And so Chameleon is wondering what in the world is going on, but to get rid of her so he can have some alone time, he basically tells Gwen Stacy that he made out with Mary Jane. And this makes Gwen Stacy mad because to her, this is Peter for one, but also she was trying to be friends with Mary Jane even though she stole her boyfriend from her. And so she leaves to get some fresh air. There is a scene the next day where Flash Thompson, the school bully, runs into the Chameleon thinking that it is Peter Parker, where of course Flash says some things that are kind of harsh, but you have the Chameleon begin to choke Flash and threaten him with his life if he does not back off. Now, the big thing about this chapter comes when the Chameleon runs into Mary Jane at the school, because of course the Chameleon just loves to make things worse for whoever he is pretending to be. And so he goes to talk to Mary Jane and kisses her again. The problem with him doing that is that this time he does it in front of the whole school, including Gwen Stacy, who is Peter Parker's current girlfriend. And this makes a whole scene with her leaving. And so of course, when he gets back home, Aunt May is yelling at the Chameleon thinking that this is Peter Parker. Honestly, makes everyone hate Peter Parker. Now to close on the 4th chapter of this book, we see the Chameleon go upstairs where he sees a trunk that is locked. And so you have him break it open, which does reveal that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. And so now the Chameleon knows who Peter Parker is. And so of course you know what the Chameleon does when he finds out that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. He goes around pretending to be Spider-Man. We'll really at first learn how he can pretend to be Spider-Man, because he does not have all the powers of Peter Parker. He only has the web shooters, and that is it. And so for the Chameleon, he is going to have to learn how to adapt to the fact that he does not have the powers of Peter Parker, which of course he will down the road. But we finally check up with the real Peter Parker, and we see that he is tied up in some kind of warehouse. He's not alone. We find out that he is with J. Jonah Jameson as well, which we kind of figure since the Chameleon first mission was based around something with Jonah. Now you have Jonah wake up and realize that Peter Parker is here, and of course he remembers him. But this is where we find out that Jonah knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Well, he figures it out when he starts to wonder why Peter is tied up with him. Because Jonah is somewhat famous and runs a big time paper company or newspaper company. But why would they kidnap Peter Parker? And so he thinks back to all the times around Peter and this moment right here, and he realized that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. But getting back to Chameleon, we see him do what we thought he would do once he adapts to pretending to be Spider-Man without Peter's powers, which is him stealing from banks. And the police are confused about what is happening because remember that the city fell in love with Spider-Man after Ultimatum, and to see him out there being a bad guy is confusing them, but also making them think differently of Spider-Man. But the Chameleon is getting his money though. And we find out that the Chameleon is using MGH, which is mutant growth hormones, to give himself powers to help him pretend to be Spider-Man. We learn this when he calls up his partner who is watching the real Peter Parker and Jonah Jameson, where this person is watching Jonah figure out that Spider-Man is Peter Parker for himself. And we're going to learn a little bit more about the Chameleon here in a moment. But you have the Chameleon partner ask what they should do with Peter and Jonah. Chameleon tells his partner to get rid of Jonah, which of course means to kill him, but to keep Peter Parker because he is a gold mine for information. Now we learn that there are actually two people who have the powers of the Chameleon. They are a brother and sister combo, which is something new to do with the Chameleon character, and she has the same powers as her brother. The question is though, is she a mutant or is she someone who gained their powers through a science experiment? But getting back to the main point right now, the sister Chameleon was told by her brother to get rid of Jonah, and so you have her pull a gun out and actually shoot Jonah right in the head, making it seem like that he is dead now. But to close on chapter 5, we see Aunt May watching the news about Spider-Man robbing the bank, and she is watching with Johnny, Bobby, and Gwen Stacy, but this tells them that this is not Peter Parker, and so she tells Iceman and the Human Torch to go find the real Peter Parker. And so when we do get to chapter 6 of this story, we see the Chameleon once again pretending to be Spider-Man and doing more crazy stuff. Except this time you have the Human Torch and Iceman appear to stop him from continuing what he has been doing. And this leads into a fight between the two sides. But of course, you had the Chameleon try first to make it seem like he is really Peter Parker. But of course, they do not fall for it, and now the Chameleon is able to get away from the Human Torch and Iceman, but barely able to, and this requires him to change his plans completely. But picking back up with the real Peter Parker, who just watched Jonah get shot in the head, is now talking to the sister Chameleon, and she goes on to tell Peter Parker how they know everything about him. Well, like where he lives, how he teamed up with the Ultimates and the X-Men, how he is close with S.H.I.E.L.D. as well. And so she tells him that he needs to tell her everything she wants to know, or she's going to kill the people he cares for. Except that is when they hear a loud crash, wondering what in the world that was. That is when they find out it is the original Chameleon, the one we have been following this whole time, where he is right now trying to tell his sister to kill Peter Parker because their cover has been blown, and he just had a run-in with the Human Torch and Iceman just a moment ago. And they try to kill Peter off right there, but of course he breaks out of his binds very quickly. Of course, this leads into a fight between Peter and the two Chameleons in the middle of the warehouse. But with Peter Parker still being drugged earlier, he does get stopped again by them. Except the Human Torch and Iceman appear, and with them all working together, of course this leads into the defeat of both of the Chameleons. And so it was wrapped up very quickly. Now you also have Peter, the Human Torch, and Iceman realize that Jonah is still alive. And so you have the Human Torch leave to take Jonah to a nearby hospital, hoping to save his life. This leads into us learning that S.H.I.E.L.D. has taken the Chameleons into custody. And tell you the truth guys, we never see these guys ever again. This was the only time they appeared in the Ultimate Marvel Universe. Now, we fast forward to also see Peter Parker getting back home finally. But of course, there has been a lot of damage done in his private life thanks to the Chameleon. And so now he has to deal with those issues. We also get one more page where we see Jonah is still alive, but now he knows that Spider-Man is Peter Parker. someone he was close to. Now, this is the end of today's video. And so guys, please leave me a like down below and also subscribe to the channel for more content to come in the near future. Also, any suggestions on books I should read, well, please let me know in the comments below, because you never know, your suggestion could be a future video down the road. But guys, I'm out of here and I will see you on the next comic book video. Later guys.